Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me today. We're about to jump straight into an absolutely fascinating, comprehensive study of a highly intricate theological framework. For literally millennia, humans have looked up at the night sky, desperately searching for some kind of meaning, a sense of order, and even prophecy among those scattered stars. That primal, deeply human desire to decipher the heavens forms the very foundation of what we're looking at today. We are going to be analyzing a really compelling series titled The Boy Who Knows the Time, which was put together and published by a group known as the High Sabbath Adventist Society. Now, right off the bat, I want to explicitly mention that a link to the original White Cloud Farm source material is provided directly below this video, and I highly encourage you to go check it out for yourselves. What we're doing right now is synthesizing their extensive research into a full summary. We're going to unpack the incredibly complex ways this group interprets modern, everyday events through a uniquely cosmic lens. We'll explore how they weave together ancient biblical prophecy, the literal movements of the stars, and the rapidly shifting tides of global power. It's a profound, detailed look into a very specific worldview about the end of days. So, whether you're a theological scholar or really just a curious learner wanting to understand different perspectives, there is a whole lot to unpack here. Let's get started. Okay, let's dive right into this by asking the fundamental question that drives this entire study. How exactly do celestial clocks and global politics intersect to predict the end of times? Honestly, this is the overarching mystery that the High Sabbath Adventist Society is attempting to solve. And what makes their approach so incredibly unique is their methodology. They aren't just sitting there looking at ancient texts in a vacuum. Instead, they are taking classical biblical interpretation and blending it with a highly specific mathematical reading of astronomy. Then they combine that with the personal revelations of dreams, and they map all of that directly onto current geopolitics to calculate the end of days. Think about the incredible juxtaposition here for a second. They are merging the ancient, eternal silence of the night sky with the chaotic, rapidly shifting, and often incredibly loud daily news cycle of the modern world. They truly believe these two wildly different realms are speaking the exact same language. Now, as we go through this, we are going to maintain a strictly neutral analytical reporting stance. We're just here to examine how this group constructs this grand, sweeping narrative. But you have to admit, it is an impressive architectural feat of theology, linking the vastness of the universe right down to today's headlines. To truly understand their message, we first have to understand their tone. And that tone is perfectly encapsulated in this foundational scripture used by the source. The night is far spent, the day is at hand, from Romans 13:12. By putting this specific verse right at the forefront of their material, the source establishes an incredibly urgent eschatological tone. Now, if you aren't familiar with the term, eschatology is just the part of theology that deals with death, judgment, and the final destiny of humanity. For this society, this isn't some abstract philosophy you debate in a classroom. It is a very impending reality. They believe the night of Earth's current history, which for them represents this period of deep spiritual darkness, global corruption, and moral decay, is rapidly, definitively concluding. Correspondingly, the day represents the imminent arrival of divine judgment and an immediate spiritual harvest, which they believe is literally right at our doorstep. This overwhelming sense of immediate urgency, this feeling that the dark night is taking its final breaths, it absolutely permeates every single calculation and interpretation they present. All right, moving on to Section 1, Decoding the Last Days. The source anchors its findings heavily on the writings of the biblical prophet Joel. Now, according to their specific interpretation of Joel's prophecies, God promised to guide his people directly through dreams and visions during the absolute final days of Earth's history, and they firmly believe that humanity is currently living in those exact precise last days. Because of this, the spiritual guidance Joel talked about isn't just a historical footnote to them. It's an active, ongoing mechanism of divine communication. Detailing the methodology of the High Sabbath Adventist Society actually reveals this really fascinating multi-layered approach to faith and, frankly, survival. Their daily practice involves three really crucial elements. First up, they rely on actual dreams and visions as a compass. A member might receive a highly specific dream, and the group will collectively analyze it for prophetic instructions. Second, they form a direct, literal connection between the words of Scripture and the physical heavens above us, the literal stars, planets, and comets. Finally, the ultimate goal of combining these dreams with astronomical observations is actually highly practical within their belief system. The whole point is to recognize and avoid the end-time plagues. They believe these prophesied plagues are being poured out upon the wicked in entirely unexpected ways, maybe through sudden economic collapse or unprecedented natural disasters. They believe that only by reading these complex signs correctly can someone be found worthy to escape them. Building on that intricate methodology, a core tenet of their faith is this concept of divine timing, specifically something they call progressive revelation. They elaborate on the belief that God absolutely does not give all knowledge at once. You might be wondering, well, why not? In their theological framework, human minds simply could not handle the sheer, crushing weight of absolute, instantaneous truth. Plus, the gradual unveiling of knowledge serves as this continuous, ongoing test of faith. So instead, specific, life-saving knowledge is unlocked exactly when it is needed, and not a moment sooner. They refer to these as revelations of understanding given at the appointed time. It's this powerful idea that as the hands of the prophetic clock move forward, new truths are illuminated just in time to lead followers into absolute truth. This creates a highly dynamic, almost tense theology, where believers are constantly on the watch, basically waiting on the edge of their seats for the next piece of the prophetic puzzle to be revealed at precisely the correct hour. Now, let's pivot and look at Section 2, the Heavenly Horologium Clock. Okay, so now we are stepping away from the earthly interpretation of dreams for a moment, and we are looking straight up into the night sky. The source material introduces a concept here that is absolutely central to all of their calculations, the Heavenly Horologium Clock. This is the point where their theology becomes highly mathematical and incredibly structural. They move way beyond standard biblical interpretation and right into the realm of cosmic timekeeping. Let's clearly define this crucial concept because it's the engine for everything else. The horologium clock, in this specific theological framework, is considered a literal, functioning celestial timepiece. The source uses the Mazzaroth, which is just the biblical term for the zodiac and the constellations, as a massive divine clock face. And I want to be really clear here. They are absolutely not looking at these stars for astrology, not at all. Rather, they view the highly specific alignments of planets, comets, and stars passing through these constellation boundaries as the actual hands of a clock. Imagine the sprawling infinite canvas of space as a grand ticking watch. They believe this cosmic mechanism was set in motion at the very dawn of creation just to map out these specific prophetic hours of Earth's final history. Every movement up there is a deliberate tick of this divine instrument. Within this intricate study of the celestial horologium, the source highlights that there are two incredibly significant hours that have been revealed on this cosmic clock. And these aren't just passing arbitrary moments, they are critical, earth-shattering junctures in their prophetic timeline. The first one is the 11th hour. Now, traditionally, the 11th hour is a highly symbolic time representing the final, absolute last opportunity before time entirely runs out. The second specific marking they point to on this giant clock is 5 a.m. So why 5 a.m.? Well, in their theological framework, 5 a.m. represents the darkest, coldest, most bitter part of the night just before the dawn finally breaks. It's the moment of ultimate rescue. It's the exact, precise time when the faithful are meant to look up and see their deliverance arriving, right as the world reaches its absolute breaking point. The detailed tracking of these two very specific times forms the entire backbone of their argument regarding exactly where humanity currently stands on the timeline. To fully grasp how this society operates on a day-to-day basis, we really have to walk through how they actually read this celestial clock. It's a meticulous, highly rigid three-step process. First comes the rigorous observation of the horologium in the physical heavens. They are literally out there tracking planetary movements and celestial phenomena with extreme precision. Step 2 involves identifying exactly when these movements align to strike the prophetic 11th hour and 5 a.m. markings on their divine clock face. And finally, Step 3, which is by far the most crucial, is correlating these heavenly times to earthly events. They treat the heavens as this grand unfolding narrative, where a star moving into a specific constellation directly triggers a significant political event down here on Earth. So, for example, if they meticulously observe a planet like Jupiter moving across a specific constellation boundary, fulfilling Step 1, they map that directly to a specific prophetic hour for Step 2. Then, for Step 3, they will scour the global news to see if a major international treaty was signed on that exact same day, which, for them, proves the absolute correlation. Which brings us right into Section 3, U.S. Politics and Prophecy. We're now making a definitive shift from the vastness of the heavens down to the localized, earthly reality of geopolitical events, and specifically, the source zeroes right in on the United States. In their framework, U.S. politics is not merely a secular matter of policy, voting, and elections. To them, it is the primary stage upon which the final acts of biblical prophecy are currently playing out. The study presented by White Cloud Farm draws a direct, completely unyielding line between the celestial clocks and earthly geopolitics. To impartially summarize their stance, they truly believe that the political turmoil, the shifting laws, and the international posturing of the United States are not random occurrences.
They focus heavily on themes like debates over religious liberty, shifting international alliances, and the centralization of authority. Instead of viewing these as normal political fluctuations, they view these current events as the direct earthly reflection of the movements taking place on the Horologium Clock. When a prophetic hour strikes up in the heavens, they immediately look to the headlines in the US to find the corresponding earthly fulfillment.
And this brilliantly illustrates how they engineer this entire framework. They literally map ancient biblical texts directly to modern reality. Take a look at this. They take the prophetic symbol of the beast of Revelation 17 and they interpret it as the overarching global political systems of our time. Furthermore, the 10 horns described on that biblical beast are identified by this group as specific modern nations and geopolitical powers operating right now today. They argue that just as horns on an animal represent power and force in ancient biblical symbolism, these modern nations represent the enforcement arms of this global system. Finally, they map their astronomical 11th hour directly to current U.S. political shifts. Again, without endorsing this view in any way, it is undeniably fascinating to observe how comprehensively they have engineered this. They leave absolutely no ancient symbol with a modern geopolitical counterpart. In their world, every ancient verse has a modern zip code. All of this complex mapping naturally leads us to pose a critical question framed by the source. Does a pattern of prophecy actually emerge from current events? Well, according to the High Sabbath Adventist Society, the answer is an overwhelming, resounding yes. They argue that the world is currently in a state of absolute shambles, but importantly, they believe it is in shambles by divine design. Think about how profoundly comforting this worldview might actually be to a believer. The sheer chaos you see on the evening news, the intense political division tearing at the seams of society, the unprecedented global unrest. To them, these are not signs of a world spiraling out of control. Rather, they are undeniable proof of a world perfectly matching a meticulously calculated end-time picture. It takes terrifying randomness and transforms it into a controlled divine sequence. The pattern to them is undeniable and clearly visible, but only if you know how to read the celestial clock alongside the daily news. Let's move to section 4 and see how this builds, a shortened timeline revealed. So we've established their clock and their political mapping, but here's where the source introduces a massive paradigm shift in their theology, a prophetic acceleration. They posit that the timeline they were originally tracking hasn't actually remained static. Instead, a profound intervention has occurred, leading to what they call a shortened timeline. This concept adds a layer of extreme imminence to an already urgent message. To explain this acceleration, the source outlines a very specific sequence. It begins exactly 7 years ago when a vital prophetic dream was received by the community. Now, this wasn't just a vision of the future. It served as a deeply emotional, spiritual petition to God. The community, foreseeing immense trial and tribulation ahead, specifically pleaded for the time of suffering to be cut short so the faithful wouldn't break under the pressure. Moving forward, they mark the 11th hour as the moment when U.S. politics visibly aligned with their expectations. And finally, the culmination occurs at 5 a.m. on their celestial clock. The overarching claim is that this desperate petition from 7 years ago, combined with the ongoing testimonies written in the stars, proves that the end times timeline has been mercifully compressed. So, how do they know for absolutely sure that their prayer for shortened time was answered? Well, the series points to a highly specific celestial event which they refer to as the sign of the Son of Man in the heavens. And this is not spoken of as a vague poetic metaphor. In their study, biblical symbolism is given a literal physical heavenly voice. They detail a majestic alignment of cometary paths intersecting specific constellations at precise moments, tracing out a definitive, unmistakable sign across the vastness of space. They literally see this celestial choreography as a divine signature written across the cosmos. They believe that by looking at this particular astronomical sign, they have received the ultimate definitive answer from God himself. For the believers, this breathtaking display in the heavens confirms beyond a shadow of a doubt that the timeline has indeed been compressed, and the final moments of Earth's history are rapidly, relentlessly counting down. And finally, we arrive at section 5, the final harvest call. So the crucial point is, having laid out all the complex mechanics of their horologium clock, the mapping of U.S. politics, and the revelation of a shortened timeline, we really must look at the overarching purpose of this extensive research. What is the ultimate call to action presented by White Cloud Farm? Underneath all the complex mathematics and geopolitics, the core of their message is deeply human and deeply spiritual. This entire theological framework is ultimately designed to mobilize followers. The source explicitly states their goals. They desperately wish to awaken hearts worldwide and thoroughly prepare souls for what they believe is the soon return of the Savior. They are calling upon their community to act as faithful watchmen. This means practically sounding the alarm, evangelizing, and deeply preparing their families. The urgency is absolutely paramount. They are pleading with viewers to share this message far and wide before the theoretical door of grace closes. In their belief, that represents the absolute final moment when a soul can choose redemption, right before the time for the spiritual harvest has completely passed. They leave their audience with this very powerful and direct final directive sourced directly from their materials. Consider what your work is and do it with all your heart. This single quote really captures the absolute dedication and immediate action expected of their viewers. Having been presented with what they believe to be the indisputable truth written in the stars and reflected in the daily news, the viewer is no longer allowed to be a passive observer. Just imagine the sheer emotional weight of this command. For followers, it must be completely consuming to feel this level of immediate, cosmic responsibility resting squarely on their shoulders. They are commanded to internalize this reality, abandon any sense of complacency, and work tirelessly, with every fiber of their being, toward their spiritual duties in these final, fleeting hours.
As we conclude this full summary of the study, it leaves us with a truly profound sociological question to ponder. Regardless of what your personal beliefs might be, how does humanity's ongoing, relentless search for meaning lead us to continually reinterpret ancient texts through the ever-changing lens of the stars and modern politics? It is truly fascinating to marvel at the sheer architectural feat of this theology, tying the ancient movements of the Mazzaroth directly to the modern decisions echoing through the halls of the U.S. Capitol. It speaks volumes about the lengths to which the human mind will go to find structure, timing, and divine purpose in a deeply chaotic world. Now, if you want to dive deeper into exactly how this specific group builds their incredible framework, please remember to explore the link below to the original White Cloud Farm source. Thank you so much for joining me for this comprehensive study, and please keep seeking to understand the diverse, complex, and deeply human ways we all try to make sense of the universe.